Hi, thanks for checking out the Devlog. If you haven't seen any of them before, I'm Three Gnomes. I'm a solo indie game developer, and I'm currently working on a game called Toby's Topsy, which is a Lovecraft-inspired psychological horror game that plays like a vintage 3D platformer.
What's that? Say that again?
So it plays like Super Mario 64 with traditional 3D platforming, but it messes with your head a little bit like The Evil Within, for example.
What the hell are you talking about?
So, in my last devlog, I created a flower enemy that sneezes at you. I also created a few different things for the settings, as well as making it so that you could unlock new skins and costumes, and essentially giving you a UI way to do that. To start out, I made a new level, which is kind of a home base level that you can find where, essentially, as you unlock other levels, you can come back here and find new things in this area. But currently, it's just a liminal space. So for this level, my original concept was essentially having one central area that branches off into other little sections related to each level, and those will kind of fill up or become accessible as you unlock them. So I started by using the tool that lets you set the height to start raising different areas, and then I essentially blocked out a base concept for what I wanted to do, and I hated it.
Alright, you know what, this was dumb. Dump it. Trash it, this one's garbage.
So instead, I decided to create a little central island that you start on, and then you can travel to these floating islands in the sky that are each dedicated to a level. So to start with, I just kind of had one little floating island, I made a gingerbread house, and that was it. And I decided it was time to import some Unity assets for basically just to make some things I didn't want to fool with making. I pretty much just imported some water textures and some custom foliage and grass and things like that. I even added in some flowers and mushrooms and other little things to just kind of make the island look nice. Since I actually had a water shader now that I'd imported, I decided to take it and put it into the fridge world and also add it on top of the custom yarn river that I'd made for the yarn level, so that around the edges it would just look a little nicer. And since I was already playing with the water, I decided to go ahead and throw it in the kitchen sink as well. So with your starting island made, with the gingerbread house and all the little decor around that, I started making the islands that are going to be floating in the sky. So essentially I just kind of made a big hill up out of the base of the terrain and then got rid of everything around it leading up to it. So it was essentially just a chunky floating thing in the sky. Then I took a cloud and kind of just popped it up underneath to create the illusion that it was a floating island on a cloud. Okay, so this first floating island is inspired by the pantry, so it shouldn't just be grass. I actually took the texture for the ground tiling in the pantry level, and I made that into a terrain texture so I could paint it directly onto this island. Now to complete this island, I just added in the trophies for the two characters that are in the pantry, as well as adding just a bunch of little bits and bobs from that level on top of this island, just kind of to set the vibe. So now the obvious question was, well, how do you get up to the island in the sky? My original concept was to essentially just take bits and bobs from the level that you're trying to get to and have them just essentially be platforms for you to climb your way up to that level. I even went through the process of making it so that it won't appear until you jump on this stool that's essentially sticking out of the water, so that it's not just ugly bits and bobs floating in the air all the time. But I still didn't like how that felt. It felt like you had to try to get up to the higher levels to see your trophies, and I didn't want there to be any sort of fear of losing or failure or inadequacy, that you're not doing good enough at the platform. You should just be able to go from point to point. So I got rid of that and essentially just made it where now you would teleport up there. To serve as the conduit for you to teleport from point to point, I put in these pedestals with these mystical egg gem things on top, and then put the logo for each level floating in front of it so that you would know which level you're teleporting to. And those will unlock as you go to those levels. And of course there will be one of those for each level, so there'll actually be quite a few of those kind of dotting this little island. You can use those to teleport up to an island, and then if you go backwards, you'll find a way to teleport back to the starting island. So an easy way to transverse without any headache at all. Cool, 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 cool. So now I could not restrain myself any longer. I was being driven crazy by the way that Toby moved. When I first set him up, I had just started to learn how Playmaker was working, and I made a lot of things wrong. I messed him up quite a bit. He's fun to play, but I knew that there were a lot of things that were wrong. For example, every time that he attacks, because the way that the collider is set up to deal damage to enemies, he lifts up off the ground, just the tiniest bit, and it's always driven me crazy. So I fixed that. Simple enough, he no longer floats when he attacks, but that was a slippery slope because I'd been wanting to do other things with his movement. I hate how when he falls on his face, he just stays there. I wanted him to have like a cool jump out of that, similar to when Mario in Super Mario 64 crouches and then he jumps out of that. It's higher. I kind of wanted something like that. Originally, when he fell on his face, you'd do that by pressing Q and holding it down, and he would essentially stay on the ground. He would keep velocity and just slow down, but he would stay down until you let go of Q, and then he would pop up. Essentially just standing up, not jumping. And I wanted it to be so that if you slide onto your face, and then you press the jump button, you would maintain the velocity, but be basically propelled into the air. So as you can see, it started out as just a little pop-up onto your feet, but with the backflip animation, and then I started making it so that you would be actually thrown higher, and then I went a little too high the first time, and then I wanted to make it so that the velocity continued forward even faster, so I tried that and messed up the first time, and then finally I had it right. And if you could time it up perfectly, this was a really quick, really efficient way to make it through the map. It doesn't look, I guess, the coolest when you're just watching it, but playing it, if you time it where you land on your face and you immediately pop up into that jump, you can really cruise through and it really feels nice. And that's kind of what I wanted all along. And also because launching yourself up out of this is the highest jump you can just do casually, allows you to reach new areas if you use it efficiently. And finally, even though I know the game didn't need it, I wanted to put in a first-person mode. I thought that would add to the horror and make it a little creepier when you're exploring, and also give you a way to look at things from a new angle. For example, with this fort here, if you wanted to see inside, it's very difficult from third person, but if you could pop into a first-person view, you'd be able to see inside. Also, certain areas might be creepier if you're choosing to go into first person. And again, I know it wasn't necessary, but it's something I wanted to do because I thought it would be fun. So first off was figuring out how to do that, because I'd never done anything with POV cameras before. So I started by just setting one up and seeing if it just worked, and it didn't, because the camera didn't really move and it wasn't linked to Toby anymore, so it was just looking around at the map, and you could still move Toby independently of that, but it was very silly. And in fact, I didn't even know that Toby was still moving until I heard the coin. So I spent some time fiddling with that and got that working, and now it would pop to his point of view when you held down the shift button. As it was set up, you were kind of just inside his head, so he was just awkwardly there. So I had to make him invisible when the camera jumped to him. And so to start out and just make sure that that was working, I just made it so that when he held shift, instead of the camera moving up to you, you would just turn invisible, just to make sure that was working. So then the camera worked, which was awesome. You could pop into his point of view and he would just disappear. So it was working smoothly. It was kind of awkward though when you attacked enemies, because you couldn't really tell what was happening, and I wanted you to be able to do that. You get popped out of it if you take damage, but I wanted you to be able to attack enemies from first person if you wanted to. So I just made it so that even though you stayed invisible, your candy cane would show up when you swung it. So that solved that. Now I had a fun little first person mode that you could pop into anytime that you wanted to get a better look at things or experience the game in a different way. All of your movement still worked, it's just now the camera was right from Toby's eyes. Next up, I started working on this little recurring area that's based on kind of a psychiatrist's desk that you'd run around on. So not too complicated, I just started by making the pieces individually in Blender. You know, a coffee cup, a metronome, a desk, a little pair of glasses, a lamp, you know, the things that you'd expect. Imported them piece by piece into Unity, and then started putting them together into a cohesive little level. For this level, the camera isn't going to be changed. It's going to be fixed, locked on a specific view that you're going to get of this desk, and you're just going to be able to move around in that space. So once I got all of that set up, including animations for the metronome, things like that, smoke effects for the cigarette, the final piece was just adding the post-processing to make everything really come together. And I'm not going to tell you too much about what this level is about, but I really love how it ended up feeling and capturing exactly what was in my head when I saw it all done. How does it make you guys feel? Tell me in the comments. One final thing I did fix in this devlog that I'll mention is actually back in the home base level I was working on. Originally I had it set up so that if you went to the water, you died, which is kind of just how a lot of things are set up, and I need to stop doing that because it takes you back to a loading screen, it resets you, there's no need for it, so I just made it now so that whenever you jump into the water, you're teleported back to the home island. So there's no death in this level, you can't die, if you fall into the water, poof, you're right back where you started. And I need to adopt that model for a lot more of my levels, because especially the levels that are heavy in platforming, like the transition level up to the freezer, having to do a loading screen every single time you die is going to be a real headache, so I also plan to set those up kind of similarly. maybe with those you will take a point of damage. I'm also planning to set up checkpoints along those paths so that you don't have to restart completely as well, so that'll tie all together. Anyways, that's a lot of what I've been doing. I'm so excited to show you other things that I've already done that I'm just not going to put in this devlog yet because they're not complete. For example, I'm really excited about this one. We had the competition when I hit 1,000 subscribers, like and subscribe by the way, to design an enemy for my game. A lot of people in my Discord did this, and the winner was Brovia. That's probably not how you say it, but I've been playing Curse of Strahd. I don't know if any of you play D&D. And so I've been at the village of Brovia. Anyways, what am I talking? Brovia won the competition with this cool flaming pie enemy. And so I made that and put it in my game, and I'm just putting the finishing touches on that, and then I can show it off. So make sure you like and subscribe so that you catch the next devlog where I'll talk about that and everything else that I'm working on. So thank you so much for watching. And I asked my Discord what my sign-off should be, so 3 Gnomes out. See you next year. It's not New Year's, though. The next video after this one will probably be after, though. He should have a sign-off for every vid. He asked for one for the next devlog. Not all devlogs. Plus, we only get New Year's 3 times every year. Depends on the content of the devlog. Good riddance. Raid Shadowland!